need for a difficult conversation can come unexpectedly. However, for one of my clients, Nick, the need came after a suspicion of his was confirmed. He suspected Molly, a team member, was undermining his authority. And sure enough, he was right. Molly casually approached Nick while he was busy with end-of-month tasks, and she asked him for a pay rise. He was quite surprised because she knew the financial position of the business was not strong and that there were no planned pay rises for any of the members of this small business. Yet she had asked the question. Her timing couldn't have been worse, as Nick was up to his armpits in tasks that needed to be completed. On reflection, his response could have been to let Molly know that such an important topic needed time set aside to discuss and focus on, and this was not that particular point in time. However, unfortunately, he explained to her very quickly that she was well aware of the financial position of the business, that nobody was up for pay rises at this point in time, and that's where it finished. Until Molly always starts early, around the same time as Nick's manager, Sid, who is also the business owner. As Molly did not get the response she was hoping for from Nick, she approached Sid. And while she was speaking with Sid, she also mentioned a few other concerns that she had about Nick's management style. Now, everybody knows that Sid is a softie. So when Molly asked for a pay rise, he said yes. Nick and Sid have a great working relationship. And because of this relationship, Nick was comfortable in having a conversation with Sid. And he expressed two things. One, that he was disappointed in the way that Molly had gone about seeking for a pay rise. And also, secondly, he was disappointed that Sid had not supported Nick's initial decision of no pay rises for the moment. Now, it was also during this conversation that Nick became aware that Molly had made some complaints about him. And Sid realised that this had put Nick into a corner, because it became aware that any time Molly wasn't going to get her way with Nick, then she would go and approach Sid. As they were a small team, they had to address this matter quickly. In preparing for this conversation with Molly, I recommended 3 things to Sid and Nick. Firstly, they start off with the conversation that initially started this whole issue, and that was the one that took place at the end of the month between Molly and Nick. Then they needed to address how future concerns from Molly would be addressed. And thirdly, they needed to meet with Molly sooner rather than later to address the matter. Now, although Nick knew what he wanted to say, he wasn't confident in how he would say it. So I worked with Nick and we worked through a role play of the situation. So this gave Nick an opportunity to practice his words a few times until he was comfortable with the words that he would use. I then recommended that he write down the key phrases that he wanted to say to Molly and take that paper into the meeting with her. I also prepped Sid for his part to play in the upcoming meeting. Although he's not comfortable in dealing with issues or conflicts between staff, he knew something had to be done, or Nick would be seen to be losing credibility with Molly. Now, I presented Sid with some ideas that he could take to the meeting with Nick and Molly and put them on the table and see where they would lead to. So with the conversation that ensued, all 3 were present, Sid, Nick and Molly. And Nick led the conversation, and he started by saying that he was caught off guard by Molly's request, especially the timing, given that he was so busy at the end of the month. Given that time over again, Nick expressed to Molly that he would prefer for that conversation to have happened in a meeting. If she brought it up at a time that wasn't appropriate, then Nick would prefer that in the future that they would set some time apart to have that conversation and focus specifically on it. Nick continued the conversation by explaining to Molly about a process that he would like her to follow if she had concerns with him. Now, they talked about the ifs and the buts of how it would work, but the conversation that flowed between them ended up with them agreeing on how Molly would express her concerns with Nick in the future. Then it was Sid's turn to talk. Now, Molly knew that Sid was going to let Nick know of her concerns. But what Sid did next was to be able to put the emphasis back on Nick and Molly to address the issues raised between them. So he recommended that they had 2 options as far as he could see it, and was welcome to hear of any others that they could think of. So firstly, Sid recommended that Nick and Molly sit down together and have a chat about the issues that Molly had raised. Now, if they weren't comfortable with that, Sid was willing to pay for a third person to come in and assist them to have a conversation so that all of the issues could be addressed and a way of working together in the future could be agreed upon. By the time this meeting had finished, there were 3 key outcomes. One was that Nick and Molly had agreed on a process that both of them would use if they had concerns with each other. Secondly, both Molly and Nick agreed that they were happy to talk with each other one-on-one to try and address their issues and resolve them. And if that didn't work, then they would take up Sid's offer to bring in a third person. And the third outcome was that they both agreed to book times for important discussions and not try to have them on the fly. After the meeting, Nick summarised the outcomes of the meeting and emailed them to both Sid and Molly to ensure everybody had the same understanding of the outcomes of the session. Time now will be the real indicator of the success of this meeting, but good foundations were laid by Nick and by Sid, and also from Molly's perspective for her participation. Difficult conversations don't get any easier over time, but what can make the difference is that your confidence can build in having those conversations and working towards outcomes that suit both people involved. Now, if you're looking for other tips around managing difficult conversations, then here are a couple of posts that may be of help for you. I'm Andrea Doyle, Workplace Mediator and Conflict Manager. Thanks very much for watching. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Bye for now.